this is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed human.
You know how it's never really about where you're going, it's about who you're going with? The right people can turn any drive into a great memory. That's something Toyota really believes. They design vehicles around real life and real people, the ones who make plans happen and bring everyone together. Inside, everything's built with passengers in mind. Comfortable seating, smart layouts, and space that actually works so everyone can relax and enjoy the ride. There's room for the people, room for the stuff, and room for the moments that happen along the way. Because when people are the destination, your ride is important. Learn more at Toyota.com and find the vehicle that fits your people.
Amazon Health AI presents Painful Thoughts.
Why did I search the internet for answers to my cold sore problem? Now I'm stuck down a rabbit hole filled with images of alarmingly graphic sores in various stages of ooze. I can clear my search history, but I can never unsee that.
Don't go down the rabbit hole. Amazon Health AI gets you the right care, fast. Healthcare just got less painful.
Brandon Gdula is a senior analyst for late-round fantasy football who previously worked at NumberFire and FanDuel. He's a multi-time FSWA award winner. He's a data nerd, a golf analyst, a cat lover, a hooper, and a big wrestling fan. These are his late-round perspectives.
I had to dust off all the equipment, the microphone, the camera. I looked it up. I guess it's been well over 6 months since I did a podcast. So
I was going to say, how long's it been since you did a show?
Yeah, I'm like, where's all my stuff? Is it even connected to my new computer? But yeah, here we are.
Was the last one that you did with Jim?
Of course. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. We love Jim here.
Love Jim. Jim Sonis.
But Jim also, I got a lot of questions about him when I did the quarterback episode this year, prospecting episode. And people were like, are you bringing Jim on? Are you bringing Jim on? But his job now does not allow him to do shows and such. So we had Alfredo step in, and Alfredo's obviously awesome, and it was a great show. And now Alfredo's doing quarterback work with Reception Perception. So Alfredo will probably be the replacement of Jim. But I don't know, from Jim's perspective, he also, this is Jim Sonis for the record.
Yes.
But from Jim's perspective, he went out on top because 2 years ago he called Jaden Daniels. Last year he called Jackson Dart. And Dart's the top quarterback from that class now in Dynasty. So way to go, Jim. Good job. But this is about you. This is about you.
But you can make it about Jim. It's fine.
No, we're not making this about Jim. You've been with late round fantasy football for like 5 months now, over almost 6 months, and you haven't done a show in the feed. And so, we thought might as well do this because you've been doing a lot of work on, for folks who read the prospect guide. Your name was thrown out there a lot because you did all the tight end work. We've been doing a lot for prepping and / getting started with the draft guide stuff, new metrics coming out. There's just a bunch of stuff that you've been doing. And so I thought this is a really good time to sort of like throw you out there, introduce you to the late round fantasy football world in a more intimate way, as opposed to the newsletter. I should have mentioned the newsletter because that's really what you've been doing a ton of every week. But introduce you to the late round world. But first, in doing that, talk about yourself a little bit. Something that you don't love doing. I understand. I know you will. But talk about like what got you into this, how you started in the space, all that good stuff.
Yeah, this is going to be an interesting one, but I can go back farther a bit. I mean, I was kind of always daydreaming about fantasy football in middle school, high school. I was on the message boards, probably at that rate, talking some smack, I'm sure, but I wouldn't do that now. But looking at things like schedule luck, like what if I played this other person's schedule? I was looking into that stuff, and because I was, felt like I got unlucky, which, always happens to everybody, but
sure,
all that kind of stuff. We're talking, I guess, 20 years ago now at this point. But my older brother, was kind of on the forefront, I guess, listening to some podcasts, and It's now defunct podcast. I think it was called the Fantasy Fumble. They're like, hey, we're launching a website if you want to write content.
I don't even think I knew this.
Yeah. Well, this is it goes right into the next step.
Yeah. This is crazy.
So my brother's like, you should do this. Like, you do this all the time. And I'm like, all right. So I did it. It was like some sort of base level. Here's why you should not take a tight end or a quarterback early, and you should get your flex like figured out, take a running back, that kind of like early, before we knew what we know now about a lot of things and before the game changed. But, it got published and whatever. So, then probably like a year or two go by, if I had to guess. The site has long been erased from the internet. So I'm scrolling through Twitter before night class one night. I see a tweet from you looking for writers for Number Fire. And I'm like, well, I mean, yeah, I read Number Fire. So like, of course. And I remember I was trying to like dig up these old links. My professor walks in. I'm like, no, I'm leaving. I ain't missing this chance. I don't know how quickly this is going to go. So I go in the stairwell. I'm hiding out in the stairwell, typing out on like this, old, now smartphone. I'm sure everything was loading real slow. But I got an email off to you. You liked enough of what you saw. And then we chatted and, I came on, wrote articles for Number Fire, started editing. And then since then, Number Fire got bought by FanDuel. And we worked together there till you left and started late round fantasy football. And let's just say I'm here now. So,
yeah. I didn't know. So the Fantasy Fumble, did you hear, that the Fantasy Fumble was the first ever podcast that I did?
Really?
No joke. That's why I was freaking out when you said it.
With, I think it was Scott or George.
George. Yeah. It was the first show I ever did. I've told this story, I think, before, but like, I was such a nervous wreck. I'm like 23 years old or something like that. Such a nervous wreck. I did it I had like a couple of beers before doing it, which is just very not my style or MO. Yeah. And I went and I was living in Cincinnati. I had a closet that was really big. Then it had good like sound, from a sound perspective, an acoustic perspective. And I recorded the show from the closet of that room. And I remember at that time, I had no idea how to like, because like when you first start, especially back then, because this was like 2011, 2012 timeframe. And back then, maybe 2012, back then, like this industry was not nearly what it is now, where you've seen so many, like hundreds and hundreds of people come up and then leave the industry. And, you kind of know, even if you're newer in the industry, that you're going to be taking criticism all the time. Like it's just what it is with the fantasy football space. And I remember I had no idea that it was going to be like that, because we didn't really know back then what it was like to be an analyst or a thought leader or an influencer on the internet. It sounds crazy because it was only like 15 years ago, but that's seriously how it was back then. And I remember getting so tilted after doing that show because I got off air and they were talking about me afterwards, like on the show. And they were saying things that were not even really criticism. It was me taking it a certain way. And then I had to go to Twitter and defend myself and defend my honor and be very, very overly aggressive about it. And it's just funny that all got brought back to me with you bringing up the Fantasy Fumble, because they seriously were like some of the first people that I had interacted with in the fantasy space. And now I'm thinking about it. What if they would have just kept going with that? They could be doing this thing full time, probably.
There are a lot of people who, like you said, a lot of people who were around and aren't really, but there are a lot of people who just are kind of around because they've been around and they had an audience. And, it's not like, that's not to comment on like, they never evolved or anything, but like getting in early, right. Like a lot of people did. I kind of think about that too for that podcast, and just kind of like, man, I remember, I don't even remember all of the things that I read, all the people who were doing fantasy like analysis, right. And like when targets were kind of a thing that people like had some access to.
We didn't even have like data on it.
Yeah. And like, I just think about if those people, or I think about this all the time too, for me, like, man, if I just like learned about some of this stuff early on, because my path is basically I'm an English major and now I'm a senior analyst dealing with spreadsheets all day. But I just think about like what would be different if I had access to like targets, or just were kind of in this a different way early on. But I'm glad I came through it with from the content perspective. That's my strong suit. But I think my background, like overall, of just being able to dig in and kind of feel it's that I say like an English lit degree. A lot of people think it's worthless, but if you apply yourself, like you're tasked with reading things, thinking about like you got to filter the information, take it different ways, like create I don't want to say create a narrative, but actually find the narrative. One of the things that I love to do, one of the few things that I take away from school, all my many years of school, one of the most important things was in an English class at Penn State. At a TA, he's like, hey, don't write a thesis statement. Like, you're going to back yourself into a corner. As you do more research, you might realize that that's wrong. And yet you kind of finish your paper and you're like, well, I'm just going to leave it like this. If you ask questions, you get to explore things. Maybe you end up with a strong takeaway. Maybe you don't. But I'd say that kind of is like a lot of my day to day now, doing stuff with late round is like, let's ask some questions. Let's dig in and like, let's see what's there. And if there's not, don't force anything. But it's been that's been my journey. But I do think about those people who kind of started early and who aren't really around anymore.
Yeah, I mean, there's definitely like, I do not envy folks who are trying to make it in the space right now. It was easier when we were because it wasn't as competitive. Now, I also think from that perspective, you bring up like some of your work and you having this feeling that what you're doing now is so much more in depth of what it was back then, which 100%, of course it is. But I also think that that's important to be able to evolve and get better and not just stick with the same process and, do the same thing over and over again. It also, though, brings up, like, for me, there's a lot of people that have these like established takes that they think that I still believe that I wrote about 6 years ago when I just don't, And sure, like the late round QB moniker doesn't help. But at the same time, it's like, make sure you're always consuming and asking questions aside from just assuming that an analyst is feeling a certain way. But you brought up your background and stuff. Like, I think that example of the thesis thing it makes a ton of sense because and why we clicked when you started at NumberFire. So for background, Brandon was a managing editor at NumberFire and FanDuel for a really long time under me. You were basically the first like full-time employee that I was able to hire and bring on to work for me. And you were such a big help with running the NumberFire editorial and the business and stuff. But we both had the same mindset of that. Like that was the mindset that we went in with all of our content, in that, you could talk to the Scott Barretts of the world and the Graham Barfields and the Chris Raybons and all these people who started at NumberFire and, amazingly are flourishing and doing great work outside of, within the space. But one of the things that I think that they would agree on is that, we were very strict with the way that we would say, let the data do the talking. Like, don't have these preconceived notions of what you want to prove because you will just force the data to say a certain thing. Instead, sometimes you're going to research stuff and it's not going to come out the way that you want it to come out, and you're going to be frustrated, but you got to kind of trash that. You might not be able to write content around that. So I guess my general question is like, how would you just describe yourself as an analyst? I think that people are getting an idea right now, but if you were to sort of sum it up, how would you describe yourself as an analyst? Like, what does your film to analytics ratio look like? Like, how are you looking at this game of fantasy football?
Yeah, I mean, like a film to analytics ratio probably is, if I had to guess, like 80-20 in terms of the data. And it's probably closer to 90-10. And I would also even say that 10 is maybe not even film, but it's just knowing what I don't know and like what limitations are with data. And like, look, I think another reason that we click is like, we know that we look at this from a data lens, but we also know that data doesn't capture everything. There's nuance that you have to be able to apply, and it doesn't always get applied. And I think that's also kind of like, I'm not going to fight the fight of like film versus analytics. Like that's not, I don't like fights and everything, but I do think that analytics sometimes gets a bad rap because people don't always grasp what good data is. And they'll see like the small, it's like the joke of on Monday night when it's like 47 degrees, like that, the Steelers do that. It's like, that's not, like those are numbers, but like, that's not data, and that's not the way that we look at things. Like, I just think that there's so much to data that you have to know you don't know, and then you have to be able to look at the right types of data. And the right types of data only emerge when you kind of test things, or at the very least, you step back and say, there's a 2-game sample of a player, playing without the team's wide receiver one, right? Like, let's say, simplify it, say start the season. In week 3, when that star receiver comes back, you can't just copy and paste that.
Right.
You can't look at yards. Like, you have to look at different things. So one of the things, speaking of Jim, I'll probably shout him out a couple of times just because he and I have, we did a podcast for a decade together. So we have a lot of the same thoughts on things. I took a lot from him. But one of the things that he always talks about is the most relevant sample. And that's one of the things that I really took from Jim, where it's really easy just to kind of grab the last 5 games or the last 3 games or the full season. But now in 2026, I feel like there's a level of maybe that's not the best sample. Maybe there's a sample with Jacoby Brissett last year for the Cardinals. That's a different sample than with different quarterbacks. But there's also a sample, Jacoby Brissett with Marvin Harrison Jr., healthy and active. That's a different sample than looking at the full 2025 Arizona Cardinals season. Right. So for me, yes, I look at data, but there are certain things that I do with data that I think are really important and I don't always see apply. And I'm not saying that everybody else is wrong. That's not what I'm saying. Where I think my brain goes to is let other people give me information. Like, there are literal coach speak trackers.
Yeah.
I don't need to sift through. I don't need to sift through every interview. I can just let that do, that part of things for me. Sportsbook data, I can let that do so much heavy lifting. Where do I fit in? It's looking at things that I don't see talked about enough. And for me, it's a lot about regression, expected fantasy points, expected touchdowns, looking at I have a model that looks at that stuff on a play level basis. That's where I'm I don't see that enough. I see yards, I see market shares, I see yards per route run. I don't see enough usage of it's not super widely available. I get that. And not every expected fantasy points model is the same, or expected touchdown model is the same. But that's the type of thing where I'm not going to learn more about a team than sportsbooks. Most likely, let me take that from them. Let me take the coach speak from other people. Where can I fit in? And so I'm always trying to ask questions, figure out where I can go. So yes, it's about 80 to 90% analytics over film. And I don't I'll watch film a little bit to see if things get supported. But I think that other is more knowing what we can't really fully capture and knowing that the data itself is not 100% indicative of what has happened or what's going to happen.
I think it's a really important thing to bring up because people who listen to this show, people who log on to Twitter, I've gone on other shows. I tweeted about this a couple weeks ago where I'll go on another show and I'll get asked about the ZAP model or something and I'll start talking about it. And then the comments on that show are why does this guy only talk about his model and analytics? Well, number one, I'm being asked about it. But number two, that's my approach with this stuff, right? That's what I'm trying to bring to the table that isn't out there from other people, right? And I think that part of the problem that we run into when there is disagreement with the way that people are approaching data is that the loudest, most obnoxious people on social media are often not doing the best data analysis. There are so many good data analysts and scientists out there that unfortunately, number one, aren't loud enough, but then number two, don't know how to market what they're doing well enough, right? And so it's an issue from that perspective where there's some really good stuff out there, but then people who oppose it are only seeing the for lack of a better term, idiots out there who are just spewing things because they want to get clicks, when there's so much more nuance to what we're trying to do. And that's why I did want to have this conversation on perspectives. I think this is a good time to do it because we've done now, 5-6 months worth of data work and stuff. I mean, there's a little bit of an onboarding period and whatnot, but we have done a lot of that work. And I'm hoping that people can now see that the work that we are doing is thought out and nuanced. And it's not just something that we're throwing out there and saying, hey, we want to make a buck. This is really, this is the best metric you've ever seen in your life. And this is why you need to use it. That's not what this is about. This is about us literally wanting to create the things that we think are missing in the fantasy space that can help us win in fantasy football. And while understanding that there is nuance to this, that there is this like attention to detail and this context that's needed and stuff like that, that often gets missed, unfortunately. And that's what gives analysis and analytical analysis a bad name in the end.
I gave credit to Jim. I'll give credit to you. One thing that you always, and this is not because you're, my boss again, but one thing I learned from you is it doesn't really matter if you have a model, if that model is not better than what exists and in whatever way you're measuring it. And like, you can throw out any types of data, but like, let's just say, air yards per route run might sound cool, but is that better than anything else? I'm sorry if there's like an air yards per route run guy out there. Like,
I think a great example of that is like, we've seen a lot of, and it's interesting data and there could be signal to it but I've tested some of it, but like yards per route run minus screens, for instance, right? Like that kind of stuff is not as predictive as you might think because it is intuitive. It makes sense in our brains, but at the same time, you can look at that from the opposite angle and say, well, screens are actually not bad for a player because that's intent. And it shows that they're probably good at football and that's still scoring. Like it's like the take away their biggest play kind of analysis. Well, that play happened and it's important.
And they can make big plays.
Yeah, right. Exactly. It's like part of the allure of that player, right? Like there's just that context that's needed, but I appreciate the love because I do think it's important that if you're going to work on something and you're going to publish something, it should be helpful. It's that simple. It shouldn't lead an audience astray where they're now, and look, I've been guilty of publishing things a little bit too early. I think, like ideas and theories and all that, because I'm kind of taking the audience on a journey with me. But then I regret that to a degree. Like I remember doing the ambiguous RB1 theory or something like that. It was called, where I thought that in ambiguous backfields, the RB1 that was drafted was typically the best player and the one that exceeded expectation. But I realized the sample sizes were too small. It was just not the right way to really look at that analysis. And so I pivoted off of it. But then again, going back to what we were talking about earlier, people stick with it and they're like, well, no, we should be drafting the first running back in ambiguous backfield when that's not really the case. But with all that being said, you built out and helped build out the ZAP model for tight ends this year. And that was a huge ad. We worked on that a lot in January and in February. And it was a huge ad for the prospect guide, late round fantasy football, all that stuff. And you have a way more intimate, understanding of the tight end class than I do because you wrote up all of the prospects. I mean, I obviously, know it, but you know it on a very, very deep level. And my question to start this with the tight ends is Kenyon Sadiq. Sadiq has a lot of haters out there, like more than I anticipated there being. I think more than, because like I'm more online than you are with some of this stuff and like seeing what's going on and what people are talking about in the fantasy space and whatnot. And I remember like hitting you up and being like, yeah, they're saying all, and you were like pretty surprised by the reaction with Sadiq. But what would you say to people who maybe drafted Sadiq in their rookie drafts or are thinking about drafting them in best ball or whatever the case may be, to give more of the bull case for Sadiq and why the model seems to not hate him?
Yeah, it's funny because I was digging into tight ends and I was like, okay, there's one guy. He's the number one first rounder, Kenyon Sadiq. I'm like, yeah, but there's some stuff here. I'm going to like be a little bit contrarian. I was like, nope, people hate him way more than I do. So now I feel like I'm strangely defending a top 16, very young, super athletic tight end. And it just feels like we maybe lost the plot with what a fantasy football tight end generally is. And
yeah,
I think some of that applies to Sadiq. So I'll get into some stuff, but I mean, like the case for Sadiq is pretty, and I mean, especially with the landing spot, it's like Jets, like, no thanks, he's toast. It's like, so it's like, there's a lot to like about Sadiq if you want to see it that way. Like, if you're really like bearish and you want to see it that way, I guess. But I think there's a lot more good than bad. Again, if you're calibrated with what a fantasy football tight end generally is and can be, and I'm about to argue for like Noah Fant and Evan Ingram that people probably just don't understand about them. But for
it's
Sadiq,
important though.
Yeah, like, so Sadiq, top 16 pick, that matters. We've had, since 2016, we've had 11 first-round tight ends. In their rookie seasons, they had an average target share of 15.8%, so almost 16%. That would be the tight end 21 last year based on the relevant, or the games that guys actually played in, for context. Like, that's not going to blow you away. If you look at the top 16 tight ends, their target share on average, 19.6% since 2016 as a rookie. That would be like a tight end 10 by target share as a rookie. Now, I talked about this in the prospect guide too, but Frank Reich historically has been friendly to the position across 10 seasons where he was the team's coordinator or head coach. His squad just once ranked outside the top 20 in tight end target share. They were top 5 4 different times. And like, you don't draft Kenyon Sadiq 16th overall to treat him like a 8% target share guy. Yeah. If they do, okay, then sure. But even on on the low, like, that's like the low end for like the late round 1 picks, about a borderline like 10% target share as a rookie. I just don't see that being the case for Sadiq. It just seems like people also are holding his competition against him, or maybe don't fully like look into his competition. But, you know, a lot of guys have competition. I get it. But he played with Terrence Ferguson, who's probably a very good tight end, as we'll learn. Maybe not, but on paper, he should be very good. Tej Johnson, Troy Franklin, Bucky Irving. Jamari Johnson is projected to be a first rounder next year, and he's a tight end. Like, Sadiq had a lot of competition, and whenever the Ducks just lost a lot of that competition from 2023 to 2024, Sadiq got more involved, but he played behind Ferguson. There were 3 receivers with over 600 yards, and then lost more, gave him more opportunity. And then he set Oregon's single season tight end record in receptions. He played with his 3rd quarterback in as many seasons. And like, we're in this new NFL landscape where we saw Marlon Klein go 59th overall to the Texans. And for anybody who doesn't know, he played behind Colston Loveland, who's like probably a generational tight end prospect, elite. And AJ Barner, Luke Schoonmaker. He had 38 career catches and a touchdown. I think we're like entering this territory where NFL coaches and staffs are like, tight end is this new, fun, interesting position, but it's also multiple positions in one. And like, they might look at a player and be like, why was this guy blocking? Why didn't they get him more involved? At running back and receiver, like, you're generally like, if you're not getting the ball, there's probably a reason. Yes, some running backs are phenomenal pass blockers. Some receivers are great run blockers. But like, tight end is this weird hybrid position where one coaching staff in college might view it differently. And then we see like Houston, they probably think that Marlon Klein has a lot of potential to be used in a way that he wasn't in college. And it's not even, and like, I'm making the case for Marlon Klein so that I can say Kenyon Sadiq was productive. It's not like he didn't have production. It just took him 3 years, and now he got drafted just after turning 21. Right. And all of this is a positive. In the ZAP Model database, there have been 6 first-round tight ends younger than 21 and a half at draft time: Brock Bowers, Kyle Pitts, Colston Loveland, Eric Ebron, Noah Fant, and David Njoku. All of them had a peak year within their first 3 NFL seasons with at least 9 PPR points per game. And I think this is where this all lands. It's like, what is a good tight end outcome for people? If it's just cherry picking George Kittle And Rob Gronkowski and like peak Mark Andrews, his like peak wasn't even as sustained as theirs. Like if you're looking for 15 plus, PPR points per game for tight ends, you just don't see it very often. You're basically cherry picking the best. So Sadiq in the model, the ZAP model, gets comped to Noah Fant. Noah Fant was a top 10 tight end in 2 of his first 3 seasons. He gets comped to Evan Ingram. Ingram was a top 7 tight end in all 3 of his first 3 years. They just didn't score a lot of touchdowns as well, but both were top 9. If you go back to 2011 and look at a player's first 3 years, they were both top 9 among tight ends drafted in that span in yardage. It's just like they're the tier below Kittle, McBride, Andrews, Laporte. It's like that is a good outcome. It's not the elite like outlier outcome. Yeah. This is all good production. I think people just like are like, if you're not Brock Bowers, you're just a guy. That's kind of what it feels like. Yes.
I agree. And part of the problem is exactly that. And it's like when I publish the rookie rankings and Kenyon Sadiq has a really good ZAP score, and then people are like, well, why is he ranked below Casey Concepcion, for instance? Well, the reason for that is because the position, like you just said, is not giving you as much value in fantasy football as wide receiver will give you. It doesn't mean, though, that the score within the position, because it's in the context of other tight ends, is what that ZAP score says. That doesn't mean that he's bad within the position. He's actually very good within the position. It's just that when we look back, and because obviously we rebuilt the tight end ZAP model, and we can look back and see who has perfect scores, and it's Brock Bowers, it's Kyle Pitts, Colson Loveland, I think, had a score of 100 in the newest one. Are those the 3 that had?
I think those are the 3, yeah.
Yeah. And it's like all 3 of them, Kyle Pitts has hit bumps in the road, but like even his output is way better than what anyone should realistically, like from an expectation standpoint. He's still done very, very well in fantasy football. It's just that I think tight end has had this really weird perception problem because understandably in season long, I mean, in fantasy in general, we really should be chasing high end tight ends. Like that's because those are the difference makers. Those are the ones that truly do matter. But I think that if you're looking at this class, you're saying who has an opportunity, some chance to be that guy, it's him. And then it's Eli Stowers probably as the other one. But Eli Stowers has generally been that tight end 2 in this class.
You know how it's never really about where you're going? It's about who you're going with. Like the destination could be totally average, but if the right people are there, it becomes a great memory. Toyota really gets that. Toyota designs vehicles around real life and real people, the ones who bring everyone together and somehow make the drive part of the fun. There's room for all the stuff that comes with togetherness: luggage, golf clubs, camping gear, plus comfortable seating, smart layouts, and space that lets everyone relax. And Toyota's lineup makes it easy to find your match. The RAV4 is perfect for everyday adventures. The Grand Highlander brings serious space for up to 8 with generous legroom and expansive cargo space. The Highlander also has space for up to 8. It's ready for big moments and spontaneous ones, balancing style and flexibility. And the Sienna is built for everyday life. Carpools, road trips, snacks, spills, and it even has a built-in vacuum for when things get a little too messy. Because when people are the destination, your ride is important. Learn more at toyota.com and find the vehicle that fits your people.
For adults with Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis symptoms, every choice matters. Tremfya offers self-injection or intravenous infusion from the start. Tremfya is administered as injections under the skin or infusions through a vein every 4 weeks, followed by injections under the skin every 4 or 8 weeks. If your doctor decides that you can self-inject Tremfya, proper training is required. Tremfya is a prescription medicine used to treat adults with moderately to severely active Crohn's disease and adults with moderately to severely active ulcerative colitis. Serious allergic reactions, increased risk of infections or lower ability to fight them, and liver problems may occur. Before treatment, get checked for infections and tuberculosis. Tell your doctor if you have an infection, flu-like symptoms, or need a vaccine. Explore what's possible. Ask your doctor about Tremfya today. Call 1-800-526-7736 to learn more or visit tremfyaradio.com.
The real question, I think, starts at tight end 3. Do you have a tight end 3. Now the ZAP model, here's the other thing too, is that when we do our rankings, it's not going to be 1-to-1 to the ZAP model, especially for lower tiered players. Like the higher tiered ones will generally align with, because those guys have separated themselves enough to say, okay, we do feel pretty confident that they're better than the rest. But when it comes to like a ZAP score of 50 or 40 or whatever the case may be, we're talking about lower tiered players that are more flex plays at best in fantasy football. And so we're going to let situation and stuff and some of the stuff that we more subjectively like dictate where we might rank these guys. So as someone yourself, having written and analyzed all these tight end prospects, I know that Stowers is the 2 for you, but who is the 3? Who's the third best tight end in this class, do you think?
This is a really difficult one, not because there aren't options, but because of where Max Clare went. I still think chips down. I'm looking at a rookie draft. I'm going to go Max Clare as tight end 3.
Yeah.
He leads this class in breakout score, super predictive at receiver, still pretty predictive at tight end. And whenever you lead, again, sort of a generational top of the first half, talent in Kenyon Sadiq, everybody's favorite, Eli Stowers, fantasy football, just like, no, he's the tight end 1. It's like the NFL doesn't see it that way. Right. Max Clare still has draft capital, and like, yes, he's got a bit of a crowded tight end room right now, but I think that if I had to sort of just bet on one of these other guys, the safest bet with a path to like, no, this guy had like multiple top 6 tight end seasons would be Max Clare. He was very productive at Purdue. Then he transferred to Ohio State, was a little bit less productive, but he played alongside Jeremiah Smith, Carnell Tate, obviously, Will Kazmarek, another tight end who was drafted 87th overall. He was more of a run blocker, but a lot of competition at Ohio State. He was 3rd in receptions behind Smith and Tate. And like, yeah, he didn't have as good of a market share, just sort of high end output as he did at Purdue, but like he was still relevant at Ohio State. And so now I think you put him on a Rams team that's a very good system. Hopefully, like they got their quarterback of the future too, I guess. So this should be a good infrastructure for Clare, who I think could very easily turn into the tight end 3, like by a good margin, because there's a lot to like about all these other tight ends, but there are kind of reasons why they didn't stand out like Clare did. Clare kind of has that, like, he's got some Mark Andrews to him. And like, again, just like you go back, most of the high end performers weren't first rounders. Like, it takes the right situation, the right scheme. To me, I think Max Clare long term has the highest sort of probability of hitting and giving us multiple like producible tight end like top 6 seasons among this class outside of the top 2.
We also have to be open-minded about, like, we both like Terrence Ferguson, but there's also definitely an out where he just doesn't hit. Like, he has to get better as a blocker. He has to do more. Like, there's improvement that needs to be done with Terrence Ferguson that I think when you look at his profile versus Max Clare's, for instance, Clare looks like a more well-rounded tight end, whereas Ferguson looks like the Darren Waller ceiling play, like could actually break fantasy football potentially. Whereas Clare, like you said, is like the Andrews, like maybe not the Kittle outcome or something like that, but like a very, very, solid, way above average type outcome. And
there are so many names and profiles in the ZAP model at tight end built on, man, if this guy hits, look out. Mm-hmm. And it's like, they don't always hit.
Yeah.
And that's not to put anybody in that particular bucket, like Ferguson in that bucket, but tight end's this weird combination. Like, some teams want you to block more or make sure you can block before you get on the field. Some teams are like, we're just going to make you a big slot receiver.
Yeah.
And I think that Max Clare brings enough just like safety to an offense that he could be like a low, like a high floor kind of play. And in a good scoring season, he's like a, top 3 tight end down the line.
Yeah. Any sleeper tight ends from the class? Because that's something that, because basically you get to like the round 5, round 6 in rookie drafts right now, and you're only looking at tight ends for the most part because the running back and wide receiver classes are so weak.
Yeah, I mean, it kind of depends. I see a lot of like, there's still generally a big 3 at tight end with Clare usually being the tight end 3 in most rankings. And then it's like, what's truly a sleeper? So I'll give some like shallower ones, but then also 2 deeper cuts. I do want to shout out Oscar Delp. He's the tight end 7 on Keep Trade Cut. So I would assume he counts for this, but great athlete. He's going to get to play half of it, I guess over half of his games because he'll play the Falcons indoors. Sub 4.5 second 40-yard dashes pro day. And even adjusting that, like slow it down a little bit. He's got the second best height adjusted speed score in the class. It's a pretty old tight end room in New Orleans. And I think there's like a good opening for Delp long term to kind of be maybe that like Kittle type where it's like, hey, this guy didn't do a ton in college. By the way, played behind Brock Bowers and like, had some competition there. So I would say Delp. And then for another shallow one, I just shout out Eli Raridon, who I think you have as the tight end 3.
I do, yeah.
But he's outside the top 5 in consensus ranks on Fantasy Pros, so maybe people aren't taking him that seriously. But productive, like efficient receiver, didn't score a lot of touchdowns though. Had some injuries, but I think he could morph into like kind of a bit of a difference maker. But as far as like true sleepers go, I think this is probably more of what you're looking for. Tanner Koziol, I would say he was it's not often that you're looking at the second tight end drafted on a team, but like Tanner Koziol is more of the fantasy friendly tight end drafted by the Jaguars compared to Nate Borkacher. Nate Borkacher, he was like a name that I was like, this guy's like a 3rd round like mock draft pick pretty much everywhere. I'm like, why?
Yeah.
The receiving data's not there. I'm like, he's just got it. The blocking's there. You kind of watch some film. I did watch film on these guys like that. I wouldn't really count that as my general process for fantasy football, but I did watch a lot more film for these prospects. And it's like, okay, I get it. But Tanner Koziol, one of my favorite kind of like stats from this class was Tanner Koziol led 2 different offenses in back-to-back years in receptions at Ball State and then at Houston. Really, really good breakout score, max yards per team attempt, both above the 85th percentile within the model. Like, I think that there's a chance that he just sort of plays like a nice role. I know there's Brenton Strange there. I know Borkacher should be on the field. Like, Borkacher is going to be one of those guys. I get up my snap grid each week and it's like, played 70% of the snaps, but didn't see a target again. I think Koziol at least has a chance to morph into something. And then the real sleeper probably is Michael Trigg. Undrafted free agent to the Cowboys, had off-field concerns, but some sources, some mock drafters had him as the tight end 2, and I understand why. Like when you look at the film, you're like, oh yeah, I see the plays he's making. They're the same plays you'd see on Red Zone or a highlight reel. It's like he's making catches, run after the catch kind of stuff. Off-field concerns, not the most complete blocker, but he also had the unfortunate pro day vertical of 27.5 inches. But he was dealing with the hamstring, apparently. There's a lot for him to overcome being an undrafted free agent, but there's a lot of potential for Michael Trigg. And I think if you're like looking at just a late round pick in a rookie draft, or he just kind of floats there, I think he's actually he might be the tight end 3 on, where is he on Keep Trade Cut? He's up there as far as rookie tight ends go. He's the tight end 4. So I don't know where he'll actually shape up, but like people probably already had their rookie drafts. Like keep an eye on Michael Trigg. I'll just say that.
Yeah. I mean, the drafts that I've done, he's been, last round type pick. So that's a good call. Like him and John Michael Gillenborg have been the 2 that I've thrown darts at tight end, just because with John Michael Gillenborg, you got an interesting situation in Kansas City. And then obviously the athletic profile is pretty good. Production profile, even when adjusted, is still fine enough, adjusted for program and stuff. So I like the call out a lot. As a bit of a teaser, you've also been doing some research on offensive coordinators for the late round newsletter, which, by the way, guys, subscribe to the newsletter, lateround.com. It's absolutely free. Brandon's doing basically an article every week in there, all very heavily researched, really interesting stuff. So check it out. Just go to lateround.com and sign up for free for the newsletter. But you're doing some work on offensive coordinators. And so my question to you is, which coordinator shift do you think could result in the best turnaround for an offense?
Yeah, I'll be pedantic here because like turnaround's the key term. I think that honestly, if that wasn't the way you phrased it, I might honestly just shout out like Drew Petzing with the Lions and say maybe this team just throws a ton and we get like an all-time PPR season by Jahmyr Gibbs, but I think it's really hard, and I know everyone's going to be on board with this, but Mike McDaniel with the Chargers, it's such like an easy call that I still don't know is being fully like sort of applied, like in terms of just overall sentiment with the Chargers and in best ball drafts that I'm doing. I feel like the hype hasn't really been there yet, but turn around. It's not like the Chargers were terrible, but they were below average in EPA per play last year. The ceiling just is like probably the number one offense, which is what McDaniel had in 2023 with the Dolphins. He's now got all the weapons in the world, including Justin Herbert. And I just want to say, like, the Chargers, they were middle of the pack in explosive plays last season. Herbert was like average in an average depth of target, so ADOT. But like these last two seasons for Miami, like Tua Tagovailoa has just not pushed the ball downfield at all. He's been at least a yard or more worse than the league average in ADOT the last 2 years. Like I think that there's still, and like Miami kind of was still efficient-ish, despite to me having like a big question mark at quarterback. And so it's like, I think it's like, I think the luster might be off. It's like, oh, teams figured out all the motion, all this. It's like, I don't think that they were really a fully complete offense. And I think that they would have been a lot worse with somebody else there. And it's not like the Chargers didn't use motion or anything last year, but they didn't get the most out of it. Their EPA numbers when using motion were not where you'd want it to be. I just think that from an upside case, going from sort of they were 20th in points per game last year, 21.8. To turn that around to like a top 5 offense, I think that that's like a very simple thing. If you look at their average implied team total based on DraftKings sportsbook odds, it's 23.8 points per game, which is 11th. It's within a half point of being a top 8 offense right there. They have some schedule issues though, which I think is also part of it. They play 4 teams coming off of a bye, which isn't great. That's tied for the most in the league. So that could also be kind of factored into that a little bit. But I think that they're very close here to being a top 5 offense. And there's a lot of ways you can get exposure to this team. But I know you like the Chargers as well.
Oh, yeah. Super. I feel like I've been talking about the Chargers, for weeks on the show and such. But it's important to call it out. This is to hear from someone else's voice and someone else's mind who's studying this stuff in just as much detail.
You know how it's never really about where you're going? It's about who you're going with. Like, the destination could be totally average, but if the right people are there, it becomes a great memory. Toyota really gets that. Toyota designs vehicles around real life and real people, the ones who bring everyone together and somehow make the drive part of the fun. There's room for all the stuff that comes with togetherness: luggage, golf clubs, camping gear, plus comfortable seating, smart layouts, and space that lets everyone relax. And Toyota's lineup makes it easy to find your match. The RAV4 is perfect for everyday adventures. The Grand Highlander brings serious space for up to 8, with generous legroom and expansive cargo space. The Highlander also has space for up to 8. It's ready for big moments and spontaneous ones, balancing style and flexibility. And the Sienna is built for everyday life: carpools, road trips, snacks, spills. And it even has a built-in vacuum for when things get a little too messy. Because when people are the destination, your ride is important. Learn more at Toyota.com and find the vehicle that fits your people.
For adults with Crohn's disease or ulcerative colitis symptoms, every choice matters. Tremfya offers self-injection or intravenous infusion from the start. Tremfya is administered as injections under the skin or infusions through a vein every 4 weeks, followed by injections under the skin every 4 or 8 weeks. If your doctor decides that you can self-inject Tremfya, proper training is required. Tremfya is a prescription medicine used to treat adults with moderately to severely active Crohn's disease and adults with moderately to severely active ulcerative colitis. Serious allergic reactions, increased risk of infections or lower ability to fight them, and liver problems may occur. Before treatment, get checked for infections and tuberculosis. Tell your doctor if you have an infection, flu-like symptoms, or need a vaccine. Explore what's possible. Ask your doctor about Tremfya today. Call 1-800-526-7736 to learn more or visit tremfyaradio.com.
Which coordinator, though, on the opposite end scares you?
This one could be a little bit of a cop-out, but I wanted to look at a team that I think we have some good expectations for, who they just might not be as efficient as maybe we would want them to be. But I'm looking for this one specifically for the Falcons. Tommy Rees. Obviously, we love Bijan. He's a consensus top 2 pick. Drake London, I've always been a fan of his. Yeah. He's firmly a second rounder. And then speaking of great tight end prospects, Kyle Pitts coming off of a career year. And like, I think I've seen multiple people kind of, or not people, but like vibes of like, he's never really called plays, Tommy Rees. It's like he called plays in college for 4 years across Notre Dame and Alabama. He took over last year with the Browns down the stretch. And it's like, it wasn't great. It was slightly worse than their first half of the year. Cleveland was bottom 3 in EPA per play from week 10 onward, which again, you have to kind of account for the context of this team that he was, calling plays for, but it was a downgrade from where it was. Slight, but still a downgrade. Their pass rate over expectation dipped from minus 3.6 to minus 4.2 after the play caller change as well. And ultimately, like, I don't love this quarterback room for this team. And I think you have to trust that like an offensive play caller is going to get the most out of a subpar quarterback situation. Yeah. That's where things get sort of thrown into question. Last year, the Falcons averaged 20.8 points per game. That was 24th. If you look at their implied team total across all their games from DraftKings Sportsbook, implied team total on average 21.2. That's also 24th. Like, it's not just me saying, hey, let's back off of the Falcons. It's like, it's kind of, they were subpar. They have question marks at quarterback. And it doesn't mean that I don't like Bijan. I'm going to take him second if I don't take Jameer. Like, if I can't get Jameer Gibbs first, I'll just take Bijan second. I still like Drake London. I think the market shares will be there. What I think is probably more likely is these guys have good target shares, but the offense stalls out a little bit. Tua can't push the ball downfield. Like, he can't make plays, or I'm not the biggest like Michael Penix fan either. So like, I just think it's more of this team could go from like 20th in offense to like 20th in offense. And whenever you can have the market shares be elite, that's awesome. But from like a pure high end upside standpoint, it's funny because we talked about like take away the biggest plays. Like Bijan Robinson can have an 80-yard touchdown any moment. But that's not really what Drake London does. Kyle Pitts is starting to do a little bit more of that. But I just think that maybe the easiest way to sum it up is like I've been leaning more toward Jameer Gibbs compared to Bijan Robinson. Like maybe I pump the brakes a little bit on Kyle Pitts following things up, which is probably silly because of how Cleveland used their tight ends in the past. But I'll just say like they were still a below average ADOT team down the stretch with Shedeur Sanders taking over. I think there are enough question marks where like maybe this is just a slower, run-heavy offense where you love the market shares, but the touchdowns, the big yardage isn't always there week to week.
Yeah, I think even with Drake London, that like he's one of those cases for me where it's not so much that you change his ranking within the position, but you change where you draft him versus the running backs, right? Where like I'd rather have Chase Brown than Drake London, where I'd rather have the upside of that running back situation than going with Drake London, given the question marks surrounding that offense in general, right? I think Drake London's phenomenal. I've been a huge backer, truther. People have probably been sick of me talking about Drake London, but I do think that there is that sort of like X factor of change within this team and this offense that we have to at least consider. Now it could go the other direction, of course, but I think that the data that you just presented makes sense that we should be at least a little bit nervous. Is there a coordinator or play caller and a player match that you're really excited about? Like specific player or position with a coordinator?
Yeah, I've mentioned this in Discord, and I think this will make Kitchen pretty happy, but Wan'Dale Robinson with Brian Daboll. Robinson had kind of by necessity last year, but he underwent a pretty legitimate role change. Yeah. And I don't know that it's fully being thought of as that. Like, yes, I'll be the first one to say, you got to look at this player with the alpha healthy. But I don't know how you just sort of put the toothpaste back in the tube with Wan'Dale. He was a sub 6.2 yard ADOT guy. It actually was a career low in 2024 at 4.7 yards. That ballooned to 8.5 last year. We had to step up again without Malik Neighbors, but he answered the call. He had 140 targets, identical, 2024, 2025. He had one fewer catch in 2025 than in 2024, but he cleared 1,000 yards last year, was 315 more than in 2024 in this new role. He wasn't a touchdown-dependent guy, had 4 touchdowns. He's probably not going to be a huge touchdown scorer, but like, I don't know that he's just, and first of all, speaking of touchdown scorer, like he's due for a 2-year correction in touchdown luck as well, which doesn't just look at like your yardage or catches. For me, it actually looks like where you are on the field, which is nice because it accounts for the fact that he's not going to be getting a ton of end zone targets. But right. Carnell Tate, as you've mentioned, wasn't the highest target share guy, even accounting for like other Ohio State receivers. There's no reason that Wan'Dale can't have like a 22% target share, even if like Tate is at 24%.
Yeah.
So I think that Robinson is a really interesting piece who it's not fun really to draft him, but I've kind of ended up with a lot of Wan'Dale so far this season.
Yeah, I like that call. All right, early best ball drafts. Give me a couple players that you are drafting early. I mean, maybe Wan'Dale's one of them, and then why you're drafting them.
Yeah, so Wan'Dale is one of them, but also Rome Odunze. He's standing out to me.
Me too.
I love Colson Loveland. You know, contractually, I have to love Luther Burden.
You do. That is very true. Yes, you would be let go from the company if you didn't. Yes,
but I do. It's just he did a lot of stuff on smaller samples, and I think that's relevant. And you get rid of DJ Moore here. But Rome Odunze has been like a tragic underperformer in the touchdown column the last 2 years. He's top 4 in touchdowns under expectation among receivers. But when active last year, so going back to like that, bringing it full circle here of looking at like actual relevant shares. Like if you look at this team, when Rome was active, he was the number 1. He had a 24% target share, 38% air yard share, was targeted on 36% of the team's plays from inside the 5. Just, he's always being like overthrown or missed in the end zone. I think that has to change eventually. So I've been getting a lot of Rome. I've also been getting a lot of Marvin Harrison Jr. He's another touchdown regression candidate, new coordinator. He cannot be used worse. Marvin Harrison Jr. cannot be used worse than he has been. And when fully healthy last year, he had a 22% target share, 39% air yard share. He was averaging over 100 air yards per game. He's going to get more involved in different ways. He has to, but also there's a lot of underlying good information and data in his profile that I think people are kind of not necessarily believing in. And the final one I've been kind of getting in early on is Tyler Warren. He was by far the biggest underperformer in the expected touchdown column for me among tight ends in 2025. He gets creative touches. He can, get carries. Daniel Jones probably going to not run as much. And I love Alec Pierce. Speaking of, just shout out Jim again. Like we've been kind of OG Alec Pierce guys, but when you look at the sample with Daniel Jones and Alec Pierce playing over 60% of the snaps, Warren led the team last year with a 22% target share, 31% target share inside the 5. I just think that he could very easily lead this team in target share, and he's being drafted as he's like a tier below the other elite tight ends. So I've been getting a lot of Tyler Warren as well.
I'm in full agreement with all of these players. Rome Odunze, I'm drafting, I have Odunze ranked ahead of JMO, for instance, right now. So that's almost a full round in equity. Rome's late 5th, on DraftKings, and JMO's 4 or 5 turn type player. The Marvin Harrison Jr. thing I want to touch on is really interesting because, I talked about him on the show earlier this week about the stuff that I learned from projections. And I talked about Michael Wilson. And I feel like the community is emotionally bullish with Michael Wilson, and they're using the coaching change as almost a reason as to why we should be bullish, because it's a clean slate. And so they're just going to go by talent, right? And they're going to say Michael Wilson greater than Marvin Harrison Jr., which I think is only happening because we had such absurd expectations for Marvin Harrison Jr. Because realistically, their peripherals were almost identical last year, but if we're being honest, those peripherals for Michael Wilson happened when Marvin Harrison Jr. was out, right? when he's healthy, their peripherals aren't even close. I mean, Marvin Harrison Jr. looks way better than Michael Wilson does. So I actually am looking at the coaching change as a positive thing because we saw the talent profile sitting there for Marvin Harrison Jr. coming out, and maybe he needs a change to be able to be unlocked in some way. The different, like last year I was fading Marvin Harrison Jr. I think I had like 2 or 3% in best ball, but he was also a late 3rd round pick, right? Now he goes like late 6th and into the 7th sometimes. And that to me is a chef's kiss place to get a highly touted prospect entering year 3 with so many changes around him. So I'm with you on each of those players. Let's look at the players to avoid, players that you're not getting as much of.
I have been pretty scared off of Devon Achane, which is not like groundbreaking, but I just like find it really hard to click a running back on a team with offensive expectations like they have. Their average implied team total is 18.1. It is 4th worst in the league going into the season. It's a 2.3 point drop from where they were last year. They weren't even that great. Like now Achane, huge overperformer by expected touchdowns because he can break plays and make stuff happen. And like that's probably what he's gonna have to do. Yeah. It's not really the type of profile that I want to lean on. And I think my biggest thing is like he could have good shares, but he could actually finally have some weaker efficiency because who is taking any attention away from Devon Achane? Like every team is just gonna be like, we stop Achane, we win. Like that's probably what it's going to feel like.
It's probably just Malik Willis, right? Like because he's
right.
Like that's the fear is his efficiency on the ground. If they're running like RPO, they're doing a lot of stuff. Like, cause I mean, I think they're, like I said in the podcast, I think they're going to be extremely, extremely run heavy, even if they're bad, even when they're bad, we should say. Like they're probably still going to be extremely run heavy. Achane, you bring him up though is a good call out because I've gone back and forth. Like you can see the range of outcomes, but I think there is some fear that like you're kind of banking on, I don't know, 18, 20% target share for him to really be able to hit in a big way. And there's so many good running backs going around him.
So we talk about my process and everything. It kind of goes back to like the Chip Kelly, like score points, but it's like, we need touchdowns. Like touchdowns are at the end of the year are like what separate difference makers. Yeah, there are like yardage outliers, sure, but like most of the non-top 3 guys, it's did they score? It's like, well, were their offenses in position to score? That's a big part of it. Yeah. Otherwise, you have to break these long plays, and I know Achane can do it, but you talk about like a Chase Brown, like his workload when healthy and when the team got better was so good, and his team's going to score way more points and he's going to have way more chances.
I've gotten to the point where like with the early round running backs, I'm trying to not overthink it. I think Chase Brown is a don't overthink it kind of player.
Yeah, it's going to be one of those like it's almost like a James Cook where it's like, yeah, well, he doesn't get like it's a different situation, different type of player, but it's like for me, I've always been like, yeah, James Cook, it's like his team's going to score a lot of points. He's very good. Like that's a different situation than Devon Achane has to go out and make everything happen for himself. And like their average implied team total this year is 24.4 points. They're going to score probably an extra touchdown a game compared to Miami. Yeah. And even, I don't know if Miami is going to end up averaging almost, or over 18 points a game. We'll see. I hope they do. I hope it's a fun experiment, but to me, I'm not really there, with Devon Achane.
Yeah, I dig it. All right. Before I let you go, I need one hot take for the 2026 season.
I was not prepared for this. I'm not a big hot take kind of guy. Let me say, can I say George Pickens outscores CeeDee Lamb?
That's a hot take.
Is that hot enough? Okay.
Yeah, that's hot. That's very hot.
All right,
Brandon, this was great. Let everyone know where they can find you. You're obviously doing stuff for late round fantasy football, and we will have a lot of announcements coming, as I alluded to on the late round show this week. But talk about what you're working on and where people can find you.
Yeah, I've been in the trenches. It was kind of crazy for you to say I've been here almost 6 months because I'm like, yeah, I've been pretty head down, like working on stuff in the background. I'm just now having my first show here, and it's like, yeah, but I've been doing a bunch of stuff that kind of needed done to get ready for the NFL draft, but now the season. So I'm working on a lot of stuff. This week I'll have schedule analysis in the newsletter that'll already be out by this point. Looking at offensive coordinator deep dives in probably different ways. I did actually do a couple months ago at this point, kind of a high level look at offensive coordinators. It's a lot of like regression based stuff that we'll probably see some changes, but it could just kind of regress back. And then we got some fun stuff cooking for the draft guide and the upcoming season. And I guess I'll shout out my socials. I'm on X at Gdula13, GDULA13, and I'm on Blue Sky at Gdula. Very rarely though.
Brandon's not getting in the Twitter streets as much as his boss.
I should just become like tweet stats guy, but even then people will be like, you're stupid for saying this. I'm like, I'm just trying to share information, guys.
Not worth it. Yeah, just not worth it in the end. I feel that. I definitely feel that. But yeah, Brandon, thank you. I appreciate the time. We obviously talk constantly throughout the day, so this was just another avenue in which to do that, but also while learning some takes and learning more about the game. But for anyone not following me, Late Round QB on Twitter, make sure you're checking out lateround.com. Make sure you are subscribed to that newsletter because like Brandon said, there's articles and newsletters coming out all the time from there. Otherwise, everyone, enjoy your weekend and thanks for tuning in.
This is Sophia Donner from OK Storytime. This summer, find your next obsession on Prime Video. And listen, we're not saying you need another obsession, but there could be a lot worse ones. Steamy romance, addictive love stories, and the book-to-screen favorites you've already read twice, so why not watch them a third time? Off Campus, Elle, The Love Hypothesis, and more. Slow burns, second chances, chemistry you can feel through the screen, and it makes you wish you were actually in that movie. We've got binge-worthy series, can't miss movies, perfect for when you're ignoring your own problems or procrastinating, as one does. Your next obsession is waiting. Watch only on Prime.
If you're a maintenance supervisor at a manufacturing facility and your machinery isn't working right, Grainger knows you need to understand what's wrong as soon as possible. So when a conveyor motor falters, Grainger offers diagnostic tools like calibration kits and multimeters to help you identify and fix the problem. With Grainger, you can be confident you have everything you need to keep your facility running smoothly. Call 1-800-GRAINGER, click Grainger.com, or just stop by. Grainger, for the ones who get it done.
This is an iHeart podcast. Guaranteed Human.